Hello. In this video, we're going to learn about conflict. Remember, last year we spoke about conflict and we talked about 4 different types of conflict. Right? We talked about 2 different categories, internal and external conflict, and 4 different types. This year, we're going to learn about 2 extra types of conflict, so 2 additional types of conflict. Okay, so we'll learn about 6 types altogether. Now, if you'll remember from last year, we have both internal and external conflict. Okay, there's 1 type of internal conflict, while we have 5 types of external conflict, although we only learned about 3 types last year. Okay. Now, the first type of conflict is man versus self, and this is an internal conflict. So it's about the character who is having to make decisions. So this type of conflict takes place entirely within a character's mind, if you'll remember from last year. Okay. So it involves a character's personal thoughts, values, emotions, etc. Often the character is faced with choices that they have to make. Right? The character has to choose between one thing or another. The second type of conflict is man versus man. Again, this is the probably the most common type of conflict that you'll see in a movie or in a book. All right. So this is when the main character is in conflict with another character, either human or non-human. Now again, the character does not need to be a human, right? If you think about Disney movies, you often have animals who think and act like humans. If you have an animal or some type of creature who thinks and acts like a person, and that creature is in conflict with another creature who thinks and acts like a person, then that is man versus man. Okay, so to give you an example, I like to use Disney movies for my examples. So, The Lion King, we have Simba versus Scar. Right, Simba, the protagonist, versus Scar, the antagonist, the bad guy. Both Simba and Scar think and act like humans, although they are not humans, they're lions, right? Okay. However, if you have an animal that thinks and acts just like an animal, like it's just a regular dog or cat, and let's say that dog chases a human character down the street, that's not man versus man, because it's man versus an animal, a dog. So it would be closer to man versus nature. Okay, the next type of conflict. There we go, man versus nature. So if you'll remember, this is when the main character is in conflict with the forces of nature, which serve as an antagonist. So, if you want to think about a disaster movie, right? People are trying to escape a natural disaster, an earthquake, tidal wave, volcanic eruption, or perhaps they're running away from a bear or a dog, as I used in my last example. Okay, that would be man versus nature. All right, and then we have man versus society. Again, this is a type of conflict that we studied last year. So this is when the main character is in conflict with a larger man-made source or group. Example, school rules, culture shock, peer pressure, etc. So I've used the example before of an American person moving to Russia and having to deal with culture shock there, or the differences in culture, and getting used to all of those differences and trying to get acquainted with their new life in Russia. That would be man versus society. Okay, so we've been through all these before last year. This is just review, essentially. If you want to go back to my video on conflict for grade 7, you can go back and watch that, and I go over each of these types of conflict in more detail. Okay. Now, man versus technology. This is one that we did not learn about last year, but it's fairly straightforward. So what is man versus technology? This is when the main character has a problem with machines or a new type of technology, or possibly an old type of technology that they are unfamiliar with. So Maybe you're watching a movie or reading a book in which the protagonist, I don't know, has to use a computer, and that protagonist has never used a computer before. And maybe their boss says, you know, you have to make this spreadsheet, or you have to make this slideshow, and your deadline is tomorrow, okay? And that person would obviously be having a conflict with the technology because they are not able to make a spreadsheet. They've never learned about it before. They have to find out how to do that and to meet the deadline. Okay, that's just a simple example. But you can think of space movies, right? Like Apollo 13 or 2001, Space Odyssey. In these movies, people are trapped in space. They either have to figure out how to use their broken spaceship to get back to Earth, or they're in conflict with the spaceship in one way or another. Okay. And finally, we have man versus the supernatural. Okay, so for this type of conflict, the main character is in conflict with the forces, or with forces rather, that are not of this world, or not something that we recognize as reality, right? So it could be a ghost or a zombie or something along those lines. So you can probably think of a lot of movies or books or series in which the characters are coming into conflict with the supernatural. Okay, you can think of really old movies like Night of the Living Dead, okay, or series like another zombie series, The Walking Dead, or even Kingdom more recently, or any ghost movie, Shudder, or The Ring, anything. Okay, so this is man versus the supernatural, or it doesn't necessarily need to be a ghost or a monster that the main character is in conflict with. Maybe they're having visions or something, or maybe they go to sleep and they have weird dreams, or and in the dreams perhaps they're being told something, and then in reality that thing happens, and I don't know. Or maybe they dream about winning lottery numbers, and they wake up and buy a lottery ticket and win the lottery. Well, that's also has to do with supernatural, right? So once again, the main character is in conflict with forces that are not of this world, or something that are not within our reality that science cannot explain. Okay, so again, just to review, we've got two categories of conflict, internal and external. For internal conflict, we've got one type, man versus self. For external conflict, we have 5 types. Okay, so 4 types of conflict we've studied before, and we've got 2 new ones, man versus technology and man versus the supernatural. Okay, that's it for this lesson. Thank you very much.